There's no chapter for this topic in the Greenwell and Evans textbook, so I've included some information from the previous textbook used in this class, as well as lots of online sources. Youth and teen services are the bread and butter of public library services. That's not to take anything away from adult services, tech services, or any other services the library offers. It's just to say that the youth of our communities are our future voters and taxpayers. And more importantly, they are the future of our communities. Youth services isn't all story time, and story time isn't just reading books to kids. It's much more nuanced than that. And teen services isn't just programming. I've outlined in this chapter some of the ways that youth and teen services are viable, exciting, important positions in public libraries, and some of the different services that can be offered to young people in libraries. Virginia Walter was a past president of ALSC, which is the Association of Library Services to Children, ALSC. That's a division of the ALA. She is an emerita professor of information studies at UCLA. She's an author, sort of an all-around VIP in youth librarianship. V.A. Walter outlined what she called the 5 concepts of the child served at the library. These are different ways to think of young people that considers their special information needs and how libraries can help them grow into active, thoughtful, contributors to society. So those 5 concepts of the child served at the library are as a reader, as a child of the information age, as a community member, as a global citizen, and as an empowered person. These competency lists do a great job of outlining what youth and teen librarians need to be able to do in order to be successful and effective in those roles. ALSC, which I mentioned on the last slide, YALSA, the Young Adult Library Services Association, and AASL, which is the American Association of School Librarians. ALA loves their acronyms. They each have their own competency lists that are specific to those concentrations. From a practical standpoint, these lists can help you formulate resumes and cover letters. They are the skills that employers are looking for in youth and teen librarians. They are also useful in pinpointing your area of expertise, as well as your area of weakness, so that you can focus some attention in your weak areas and have a name for them so that you can do some research and practice on those things. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know until it comes up and we realize we're at a disadvantage. So these lists can help you hone in on what to highlight in an interview as your best qualities, as well as offer weaknesses that are more thoughtful than I'm a perfectionist or I struggle with time management. For example, if you don't have a lot of collection development experience, talk about the ALSC competency that says, and I'll just quote it here, demonstrates a knowledge of cataloging, classification, indexing procedures, and practices to support access to children's materials. You don't have to say all that, but just say that you don't have a lot of cataloging experience and you're looking forward to practicing those skills, or that you're enrolled in a niche academy class on the topic, or that you're hoping to do some basic cross-training in the technical services department, or that you hope to have support to attend a conference on this topic. All of that sounds so much more thoughtful than, the old standby weaknesses. When you're asked what your weaknesses are, pinpoint something more professional, something you've really thought through and ways that you're working on it. This list comes from page 236 of Introduction to Public Librarianship by McCook and Bosselier, which is the textbook I used to use for this class. It takes those formal competency lists that we just talked about and highlights some keywords. Each of these can be related directly to a competency on one of those lists, but these are more general and they apply to all types of librarians who serve young people. Again, these are some of the things that employers are looking for and that you can highlight as things you are especially good at, or point to specific projects or programs you've done. or would be interested in doing that highlight these expectations or areas you're working on. But the way this list is phrased as expectations mean that these are the basic things that youth librarians are expected to be able to do to some degree. Prioritize discovery and exploration, promote innovation, value an inclusive mindset, have a strong command of digital technologies, knowledge of children's literature, reading and storytelling abilities, implementation of children's programs and events, and organizational skills.
Collaboration is key with youth librarians. Public libraries can collaborate with school libraries, being aware of trends in the school systems, being knowledgeable about current education standards, assessment methods, curricula. When Common Core curricula was introduced, there were effects on public library collection management. There's a bigger focus on nonfiction, so nonfiction collections changed and had a different focus. So that kind of thing. Reading levels, advanced reader, Lexile, leveled readers. People will come to the children's desk at the library and ask for level 3 books. And publishers just don't publish children's materials that way. There are so many different reading level systems that, the publishers just don't always put every breakdown on their book. So you don't know what reading level a book is. The advanced reader, Lexile, and leveled readers numbers are pretty easy to find online. And some of the databases too will tell you what the Lexile level is of a book. School libraries collaborating with public libraries for joint programming, communicating about assignment needs. I can't tell you how great it is to have a teacher or a librarian from the school contact you at the public library and say, gosh, a lot of kids are going to come in for this kind of book or this kind of information. We can make sure we have materials ready, that the librarians understand the assignment and can get the kids what they need so that they can do their assignment. Those collaborations and communications are so important between school libraries and public libraries. And of course, we can partner for summer reading programs. We do outreach at the schools, letting kids know that summer reading is about to begin. We let the teachers know that it's going to happen. We communicate about things like summer slide. We don't want kids to lose their reading abilities over the summer. We want them to continue reading all summer so that when they start school in the fall at a new grade level, they're ready to go. They haven't slid back at all in their reading levels.
Outreach is a common activity among youth and teen librarians. This means taking collections and programs and services or information about the library into the community to any institution or agency, in this case, that serves children. Schools, parks and rec. I've listed a lot of ideas on this slide. I want to call it book bikes. Book bikes are a newer trend gaining popularity with libraries. They are literally a book with a bike with a big storage box on them, like a bookmobile in bike form. Sometimes they bring Wi-Fi into the community or other technology. Book bikes are really interesting, and I'll put a link in the module about them. Some other ideas I've listed here are little free libraries, daycare centers, farmers markets, and story walks. Let me call out story walks. There is an initiative called Let's Move in Libraries, which is a partnership between the University of North Carolina Greensboro School of Education and Storywalk. Storywalk is a registered trademark of the Kellogg Hubbard Library in Montpelier, Vermont. Although a lot of libraries use the general concept of a story walk, for copyright reasons, they call it something else. You can't call it story walk unless you're following the actual, story walk program. So some people call it a story stroll or a story book walk or something like that. The idea is that as you're walking through a path or a park, there are big book size images from a story laminated or mounted in a weatherproof way so that as you move along, you read the story as you go. They've been made even more accessible in some cases by adding Braille, which is a great idea. The idea with Let's Move in Libraries partnership is to promote literacy, reading, health, exercise, and movement in the community. As with everything, diversity is crucial in youth and teen librarianship. We want to embrace and celebrate diversity with children through programs, through our displays, the experiences we provide, and of course our collections, the materials on the shelf. If you Google "libraries are for everyone," there's a whole collection of these images like you see on the screen that libraries can use for promotion. We also need to diversify librarianship to reflect the communities that we serve. I'll put some links in the module about this. It's important that children see themselves reflected in librarians, that they see librarianship as a viable career choice, and that they have role models in this industry. The hashtag #OwnVoices was created in order to help recommend books by authors who write from their own experience and identify the same as their diverse characters. We Need Diverse Books is a group that advocates changes in the publishing industry to make more books available that reflect the lives of all people. They quit using the #OwnVoices hashtag in 2021. They determined that it could put the authors in uncomfortable or even unsafe situations if it was used too broadly or vaguely. So We Need Diverse Books supports only the language that authors reveal and celebrate openly about themselves and their characters. They don't make any assumptions about anyone's identity. So We Need Diverse Books no longer uses the #OwnVoices hashtag. I know that the Novelist Database still uses it, and it's still used in other resources and other places, but I wanted to explain why We Need Diverse Books no longer uses it. Here's something cool. There's a toolkit available on WebJunction called Conscious Child Family Book Discussion Kits on Racial Equity, Identity, and Justice. Kind of a mouthful. They were created by a librarian in Ohio who recognized that parents don't always know how to hold serious conversations with their children about topics like racial equality, identity, and justice. The kits include book lists, discussion questions, and resources for further reading on these difficult topics. And I'll put a link to this in the module as well. Social media is another way to reach teens where they are and to reach parents, teachers, and caregivers as well. The idea here is that young people use different social media apps and platforms than adults. There are studies about what the most popular social media apps are with different generation groups and age groups. Teens are more heavily on Instagram and TikTok, while adults tend to prefer Facebook. So there are different ways of reaching different people with different messages. Social media is a very effective way of reaching a wide audience. Information about programs that you're having, links to resources, news about the library and the community. Bringing this back to youth services, highlighting what young people are doing in the library or even in the community or at their schools are some ways to connect the library to the community. If the local robotics team or the marching band or the football team wins a big tournament, celebrate that. Share that organization's posts. Link it back to programs or collections the library has on those topics, or just plain celebrate their success. Funny memes can be a fun way to connect to the community too and show the library's personality. Introduce or profile staff members with highlights of their library work and their reading interests. This makes staff more approachable to young people who may recognize you from the post when they come into the library. Or ask teen advisory boards or other teen groups in the library to create content for the library's social media profiles. It's a good exercise in collaboration, learning appropriate use of social media, connecting what teens care about to the library, and even creating teen ambassadors for the library.
Homeschooling families are big users of public libraries. The public library might be a main source of the materials and the information that they use, or curriculum materials. We often invite homeschooling cooperatives and homeschooling families to come to our enrichment programs that are related to special topics like art, music, and science, like I've listed here. My library used to do a special program sort of during the school day that was promoted directly to homeschoolers as a special thing, just, not just for them because anyone was welcome, but it was at a time when a lot of the school kids were not available. This creates these opportunities for socializing so that other homeschooler families can meet each other, get to know each other, and it also just enriches their home studies. They can come out into the community, into the library, and make the library part of their lessons and their learning. It enriches what they're learning. We also provide special, curriculum materials and collection. We have big books and, different parent-teacher. We call it the parent-teacher collection in my library, but it's full of all kinds of, Hooked on Phonics and different kits and different sets like that they might use in homeschooling curricula. Here's an important topic. Every library has a reconsideration policy, and if they don't, they should, so that when someone doesn't like what they see, they have a path to take to talk to the library board about what's important to them. Now, of course, libraries are very, very careful about censorship. We don't just remove items from our collections because someone was uncomfortable with it. We educate them about what we do have in the collection that reflects their values, how to find those materials, how to talk to librarians about what's important to them to find materials that will work for them. But we also want to listen to people. We want people to understand that we hear them, that we appreciate their values, and that we want to make sure that we do have materials that represent their values in the library. So a reconsideration policy, they're taken very seriously. They usually go as far as the library board to decide what to do with things. Sometimes if we're not going to remove materials from the library, we might move the materials to a different collection. We might move them from children's to teen or from teen to adult. That is often a good compromise that makes everyone happy. In loco parentis is something that the schools have. Teachers act in place of parents. They make decisions for kids throughout the school day when parents are not available, such as reading choices. What they teach in the classroom and what the kids read in the classroom, the teachers are choosing for the children. The public library does not have in loco parentis. I love this quote here. Everyone has the right to make his or her reading choices, and only parents have control over what their kids read. If you are successful in conveying that, then you will have just introduced them to the principles of intellectual freedom. Page 247. Such a perfect quotation about this. Censorship is to be avoided at all costs, but it's a sticky situation because we do want to make sure that parents and children are heard, that their values are important, and you do want to make sure that you have a balanced collection so that there are materials available to everyone. For collection development in youth and teen services, you can read book reviews and material reviews in Hornbook magazine, School Library Journal. VOYA stands for Voices of Youth Advocates. It's more of a teen materials journal. Also, Publishers Weekly, Book List, Library Journal, and Kirkus are all review journals that include youth and teen materials. There's a whole class on collection development, and I have so much to say about the topic, but currency and relevancy are so crucial in youth and teen services. We want to give kids the very best that we can. They're using our materials for school reports. They're using our materials to explore the world and explore ideas. And so we want to give them the best information that we can. Kids don't have the capability of understanding that what they're reading maybe used to be true but isn't anymore. So currency is so important. Also, nonfiction is not well reviewed. So vendor visits may be worthwhile in public libraries. Very often the vendors will call and ask if they can come and show you different series and things that they've got that are new. It's worth doing in youth services because nonfiction is not well reviewed there. Reader advisory for youth. Here are some links to some good book lists and resources, award winner lists. Something interesting for reluctant readers, you can suggest to them nonfiction sometimes goes over better with reluctant readers than a novel, because they can sort of pick through it and browse through it, where a novel feels like a cover-to-cover commitment. Graphic novels often appeal to reluctant readers. Also, if you can do pop culture characters or movie tie-ins, anything about Lego, Star Wars, superheroes, Harry Potter, you name it, reluctant readers are more likely to be interested in movie tie-in characters and pop culture characters. If you're talking about children with a high reading level at a young age, you have to keep in mind the appropriateness of content. Just because they can read at a 12th grade level doesn't mean that they should read at a 12th grade level if they're 8 years old. And parents will tell you that their child is gifted, and they very well might be. There are so many smart, talented children, but we have to give them materials that are appropriate for their age, as well as challenging for their vocabulary. That can be tricky to do. Some of these award lists and book lists that I have linked here are good choices for the high reading level at a young age kids.
Let's talk about reference service to youth and teens. We provide homework help for kids at the reference desks. We help kids find information about things they enjoy or things they're interested in, like hobbies and pets. Self-help is a common reference question, especially related to younger children. Parents are often looking for books to help their children learn about or cope with feelings, family changes like divorce or a new baby, or the death of a pet or a family member. Teens are looking for information about college prep or getting their first job. They're interested in hobbies too, gaming, fashion, sports, music, technology, anything really. Reference service for youth and teens is about connecting them to what interests them, connecting them to resources for schoolwork, and even helping them to understand the world around them. Young people are curious about other people, other places, new ideas, and even big concepts that they hear their parents talking about that don't make sense to them, like politics or social justice issues like racial equality. Those big ideas that those toolkits that I mentioned earlier help parents discuss with their kids. Teens may be interested in exploring some of those ideas on their own. So having materials that take an appropriate approach for their maturity level is important. They're exploring their identities and their interests to figure out who they are. They're also trying to fit in. They're reading and they're watching and they're listening to what's popular with their age group. So connecting pop culture to teen reference service can be really useful. Also keep in mind that young people like apps, especially teens. They might not be thrilled about a print encyclopedia, but if they can get the World Book app or a database app on their phone, it makes doing homework and research a little more interesting. Lots of library databases have accompanying mobile apps. Kids might not remember the 10 steps to getting to the database through the library website, but if you show them how to download the app, you look more with it and relevant to them, and that's a process that they can relate to. Searching a database sounds adulty, but looking it up on an app sounds doable. Programming is huge in youth services. I would venture to say in some libraries that it's something that youth librarians spend more time on than adult services librarians. That's not true in every library, but programming is a core piece of being a youth and teen librarian. We've talked previously about outcomes and outputs. Youth and teen programming is very outcome-based. It's also experiential and literacy-based. We like to give kids experiences and focus on literacy outcomes. Different kinds of literacy too. I put an article in the module about teen-driven spaces. The idea there is that teens plan the programs and even run the programs. They have a vested interest in the teen programs and spaces, and the librarians are there in an advisory capacity. There are so many great websites and resources with ideas for youth and teen programming. Program ideas are shared, and you can adapt them to your goals and your community and spaces. There's a whole page in the module about programming ideas, but I've listed a few on this slide too, and I'll just call out a few here. Bad Art Night. is so fun. It's a great idea for cleaning out your supply closet of all those leftover bits and pieces. So kids throw together weird art pieces with feathers and googly eyes and fabric scraps and glitter. And rather than having a finished product on display that they're trying to emulate, they make whatever they want. And being odd or imperfect is the entire point. First chapter night is a way to ease kids into book discussion groups. It's great for reluctant readers because they literally only have to read the first chapter. Some kids will get hooked and read the whole thing, and other kids will be satisfied with the first chapter and feel good about having read something and can participate in a less intense discussion about what they read, where they think the story is headed, how they might continue the story if they were writing it. They can share which characters they like or don't like so far, and all with only a commitment of one chapter. Code camps and code clubs are popular and turn what might otherwise feel like schoolwork into a hobby for kids who really enjoy it. It's one of those programs where they're having fun and meeting kids with similar interests while not even realizing that they're practicing and learning skills that will benefit them academically. I mentioned the inclusive social group that my library used to have. It didn't come back after COVID, but I really liked that one. That was just a social group that watched YouTube videos, played games, did crafts or other activities, and was presented in a supportive, inclusive way that kids who are socially awkward or have any kind of disability or challenge can make friends and work on social skills without any pressure. Everyone comes as they are, they're welcomed, they're appreciated for whatever they can do, and they can enjoy library programming accessibly and inclusively. It's important to respond to the needs of your community and listen to the needs and wants of parents and teachers and caregivers of youth and what they're asking for. Here is just a few examples of that. You could change the title of Storytime to Kindergarten Readiness. That highlights some of the skills that kids will gain from attending Storytime. Storytime sounds fun, and there's nothing wrong with calling it Storytime, but Kindergarten Readiness, or Kindergarten Readiness Storytime, gives it a whole different vibe. If you think about it, Storytime has always been about kindergarten readiness. It's about expanding attention spans, increasing fine motor skills if you do an activity or a craft. It's about learning to be cooperative with other children. It's about reading slightly longer books with higher vocabulary. Your library might have different story times for different ages that explore different kinds of books. Baby time, toddler time, preschool age, or whatever. By the time the kids get to kindergarten readiness story time, they're doing more complex activities and listening to longer stories. Another idea is to add a separate collection of materials related to STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. STEAM has become a more important part of school curricula over the last few years, so public libraries adding STEAM collections supports curriculum goals. There are definitely a lot more trends and ideas out there about how public library youth and teen departments are responding to the needs of their communities. That would be a great topic for your final paper in this class if that's something you're interested in. So I'll leave it with those two examples. Early literacy is what children know about reading and writing before they actually learn to read and write. It's about laying a foundation of skills that will make learning to read and write easier when the time comes. It includes being read to and learning language skills by being exposed to spoken language. It's about seeing written words and letters and hearing how written language connects to spoken language. It's about vocabulary and hearing the sounds that make up words. It's about storytelling and narrative, that stories have beginnings, middles, and ends. A lot of public libraries have early literacy specialists on staff, or they have early literacy collections or special programs for those skills. The 3 initiatives listed on the screen are great to incorporate into public library services for children. 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten is literally a list of 1,000 books that parents can read to their children with the goal of completing the list before the child enters kindergarten. Every Child Ready to Read includes toolkits and resources about writing, reading, singing, playing, and talking that help form those early literacy skills. And TALK, which stands for Text and Learn for Kindergarten, is an award-winning app that was developed by the Ypsilanti District Library. Parents subscribe to the service and they receive early literacy tips and activities by text, 8 to 10 a month, I think it is, that they can incorporate into their daily lives with their children to get them ready for kindergarten.
Here's another category important in youth services, English language learners. So there are e-resources or databases. LOTE is Languages Other Than English. It's similar to Tumble Books. They both are stories that are read by a narrator. LOTE are languages other than English. Tumble Books is mostly English, but they do have some other international language stories as well. Many public libraries have ESL or ELL materials for children who are new to the country. They're learning to speak and read English. Homeschool families might find this useful. Their libraries offer literacy classes and spaces for tutors, so if kids are getting extra help in English language, they can use the library's materials and study rooms or meeting spaces to meet with tutors. My library even has, one of our adult librarians is a trained literacy tutor. She's on the board of the local literacy council. So I'm not suggesting that every library should have someone on staff who does that, but it's certainly an opportunity. What a nice liaison it creates between the library and the literacy council. Consider if you have a population of non-English speakers to create signage in multiple languages. It's helpful to families who are learning to speak and read English, but it's also a nice learning opportunity for kids who do speak English to see what those other languages look like and sound like. High-low books are books that are high interest and low vocabulary, so that older kids or teens or even adults who they're learning to read English and maybe their vocabulary's not real high yet, but they don't want to read the board books and the story books. They want something at a high interest level. So high-low books have high interest level for more mature audiences with low vocabulary. In addition to diversity, and someone introduced me to the acronym IDEA, which is Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access. Let's talk about the access and equity piece of that. Remote learning opportunities that public libraries can offer access to library materials to people who can't come into the library during a pandemic or for whatever their other reasons may be. Going fine-free has been highlighted for access and equity because it makes materials available to people who cannot afford to pay fines. Fines in libraries penalize those experiencing poverty and just low-income families. So going fine-free improves access and equity to library resources. Intellectual freedom is all about providing access to materials and making materials equitably available to anyone who wants to read them. There's another slide on intellectual freedom, and there's, that's a big trend in public libraries right now, are people actively trying to take away access to library materials. It's just an ongoing battle in so many places in the United States. So intellectual freedom is more important than ever, and it has to do directly with access. Home delivery is a service that libraries can offer, which again improves access to library materials for those who can't get out of their houses. Either they're homebound and just can never leave home, because they don't have transportation, because they are ill, because they, for whatever their reasons, they are shut shut into their house. And this includes all kinds of families. It's not just, seniors or, elders. Children can be stuck at home too because their parents can't get them to the library. So my library a few years ago expanded our definition of who was eligible for home delivery. We even changed the title of it. We used to call it homebound delivery. We now call it home delivery, and it's for anyone who needs it for however long they need it. If, the parent of the home broke their leg and they can't drive, or they had a new baby and it's just too hard, whatever their reason is, maybe it's for a week or a month or a year, we don't ask a lot of questions. If you need home delivery, we're going to accommodate. We're going to make access to library programs and services and materials available to people in their homes. One of the great things that happened because of the pandemic was virtual programming. We did it because we had to in the early days of the pandemic when libraries were shut down back in 2020. Now we do it because it makes programming more accessible. And so we very often will do a hybrid format of programs for both children, teens, and adults, so that our programs are accessible to people whether they can get to the library or not. And then reading programs that don't penalize poor readers. It used to be very popular to have summer reading programs or any kind of reading program where the child that read the most books got the prize, right? Or you have to read X number of books for the summer to complete the program and be eligible for the prize. We have since then we've been encouraged to create reading programs that don't penalize poor readers. Kids who struggle to read, they're never going to hit that benchmark. They're never going to be able to finish the program. It penalizes them. If all they can manage is a chapter for the summer or a chapter for the week, that's great. Their effort has to be recognized and we want to cheer on the kids that aren't the book a day readers, right? The kids that come to the library, they're big readers, big library families. That's like preaching to the choir. Those kids, need reading programs as much as anyone else, but reading programs that help and encourage those reluctant readers or kids with reading challenges, that reading is not just for those who do it quickly or for the most number of books read. It could be, in 15 minutes a day if you read 3 sentences, or if you read 3 books, yay for you. We give credit for whatever you can manage in the time, in the space that the reading program covers. Space planning in youth and teen spaces is a very specific thing. There is a toolkit on WebJunction about creating smart spaces, youth spaces that promote active and participatory learning. We use this term warehouse of books a lot, that libraries are not warehouses of books. That is so true in youth services. We want to create spaces that are age appropriate, so the teen space looks and feels different than the tween space, the baby space, the children's space. That we have spaces that are both appropriate and appealing, that kids want to go to the space that's meant for them. We have spaces for passive programming. In our teen zone at my library, we have a lot of passive programming. We want kids to always have something to do. We have board games, and we have video games, and we have just various we have craft supplies out that kids can create things, all kinds of different passive programs that we have. The furniture is important. The color needs to be appealing. You definitely need washable surfaces. You need snuggle spots in young children areas so that Caregivers, and guardians can read with small children and be comfortable and make a nice moment out of that. You want sensory friendly spaces. This is a lot to ask of libraries that, have limited amount of space. Whether it's a small space or they just don't have a lot of funds to put into it. If all you have is one room or one corner, I understand it's difficult to separate spaces for teen and babies, and all these different age groups. This WebJunction toolkit has a lot of great ideas, though, for space planning that's appropriate for different age groups. And so much more. In my library, we often say that the success of our library is, very dependent on youth and teen services. Those are your future taxpayers and your future voters. But more importantly, if we remember back to that list from V.A. Walters of the 5 concepts of the child, that they are community members and they are readers and they are all of those things. And so, it's so important that we create readers and learners out of children so that they remain library users and, learners, lifelong learners. I love this quote from Julie Andrews, who was the chair of National Library Week way back in 2008. She said, "The world is full of magical places, and the library has always been one of them for me. A library can be that special place for our children." I love her emphasis on the word place. The library is about literacy, and literacy is not only about reading. We have, computer literacy and financial literacy, and reading literacy as well. There's all these different kinds of literacy. It's called transliteracy, actually, the ability to use information in a variety of formats. So the library is the place where you learn how to do all that. And the younger we learn how to do that, and the younger we inspire that curiosity in children to learn, the better off all of our future will be. Our communities will be stronger spaces. Our school districts will be better. It's just better all the way around. I love this module on youth and teen services, and I hope you did too. Have a good week, everybody.